Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our weekly Coffee and Compliance. We're going to get started right away, so welcome again. We are hosting our Coffee and Compliance, which is a weekly webinar where we chat with thought leaders, regulators, about emerging issues, career development, case studies, and so much more. Today we'll be featuring Tina, an area land and environmental manager at Lehigh Hanson. She'll be discussing the impact of software in the building materials industry.
Yeah. And we know that everyone has some really awesome questions. So we started to open up the last 5 minutes of our discussion for you to ask questions for Tina. If you do have any questions, you can submit them in the questions option in your control panel, and we'll try to ask them before the end of the webinar.
And we like to always introduce ourselves before we dive too far into this. So with that, my name is Celine. I'm a customer success manager here at Mapistry.
My name is Jillian, and I'm the compliance solutions manager, and both Celine and I work within the customer experience team here at Mapistry. And for those of you who are new to Mapistry and you're on the call this morning, welcome. We are an environmental compliance platform on the software side for industrial facilities. Mapistry focuses on providing transparency, promoting collaboration, ensuring efficiency, and finally creating accountability.
Yes, we are a data-driven platform that helps companies monitor, analyze, and track all their environmental compliance needs in one system. And with that, we'll jump into things. So welcome, Tina. It's really great to have you here. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Definitely. We're very excited to have you.
Yeah. Well, a little background. Lehigh Hanson has been a customer with Mapistry for a while, and we've had the pleasure, the whole CX team has had the pleasure of working with Tina and her colleagues to help implement Mapistry at multiple facilities for Lehigh Hanson. So we're very excited to have you join and kind of hear a little bit more about your background.
Yeah, great. Yeah, you and your team are really great to work with. I think it's kind to say that you like working with me because I do ask a lot of you guys. So I really appreciate everything that you do.
Yeah, we really appreciate you, and it is a pleasure. And we love your feedback and working with you because you push us to be a better company, and that's the best thing ever.
Definitely. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump to our questions for you this morning. So our first question for you, and we would just like to know if you can tell us a bit about yourself and for our audience, and a little bit about your background and how you've built a career here in the EHS field.
Yeah, definitely. So I got into this field right after college. I started working with with another mining company called Granite Rock. It's a regional one down in the coast. I was with them, for quite a bit of time, maybe 8 years, and then I consulted for a couple of years, and then I've been with Lehigh Hanson for the past 8 years. So I've been in the mining and construction materials industry for my whole career. It's about 18 years, and I've been in the environmental field for that whole duration. And I've also been in the Bay Area my whole life. So currently in my role with Lehigh Hanson, I cover the Bay Area. So I do both environmental and land use management. And so that includes training and compliance and a lot of growth and expansion support through the permitting process.
Awesome.
Yeah. Sorry. What are some things in this industry that you've enjoyed, being in it for such a long time? Some of the pros and maybe some of the cons, things that you've learned along the way?
Well, I mean, the pros definitely is it's really cool. I get to play with these, I don't get to play with the big equipment, but I get to see them all the time. And I have a little boy, so it gives me major street cred as a mom, with a hard hat, and I can take him to see the haul trucks. So, I just find the industry to be very fascinating, just taking big rocks and crushing it into smaller rocks. And then from that, adding different materials to make concrete and asphalt and just really all the materials that we see in our day-to-day lives. And it's fundamental to our society. So to me, it's just a very fascinating process. It's always changing. You know, a lot of people ask me, what's a typical day like for you? And I actually really don't have a typical day. My role is very project based, so so it changes every day, every week. And I currently cover about 14 facilities. And one of the things I really enjoy is it spans all the different types of building materials. So I work with mines, with sand washing, offloading, with imports, cement distribution, and hot mix asphalt. And then within those different industry groupings, I deal with all the environmental media that can span there. So that includes stormwater, processed water, hazardous materials, waste, SPCC, air quality, biology, land use. So it's just a wide breadth, and it's very interesting. So to me, that's kind of the biggest pro, I guess, is just it's always changing, which could also be the con, I guess. You know, it's sometimes it seems like I'm never caught up.
Yeah.
So it's challenging and exciting.
Yeah, definitely. That's a lot to manage, but it sounds like it's never boring, which I think is a very nice thing to have, like to have that excitement. And with covering so many facilities and having to understand so many regulations, are there any tools? It can be software, it can also be like other things outside of software that you use to help you on a day-to-day to maintain and stay on top of everything in all your facilities?
You know, before Mapistry, really not much. It's kind of an old school industry, and so I think we're starting to really embrace more technology and what technology can do for us. Just typically, just the basic, I guess, Microsoft suite of software programs, and we do have another program that we used for managing some of our real estate holdings and land use, and it does a little bit of task checking, but it didn't really help me get a good comprehensive view of where all my sites are. And yeah, that was one of the main challenges I had is, you know, at the time I started with Mapistry, I think I had maybe 30 sites in my area, and it was just a struggle just keeping them all straight. And so I think it's important to have something like Mapistry where I can just get a comprehensive shot across the board. With my personality, I love to be organized, I love to be scheduled, and so it used to just drive me bonkers, just having all these things and all these different places with all these different people.
Yeah.
So I think there wasn't really a good tool that I had in hand. You know, just Excel, you know, Outlook, pen and paper, getting in the truck and driving around.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds like it could be a lot to try to keep organized. And I think it takes away sometimes from you focusing on what is actually needed on the facility because you're spending so much time just trying to understand where they're at instead of like thinking a little bit more proactively than.
Yeah, we used to have binders upon binders, you know, and then we started trying to color code the binders, and then it's like, but at the end of the day, you're still looking for a sheet of paper that someone left in their truck, you know, from last week that you have to go and find and put it in the right binder. So, it was kind of chaotic for a while.
And just to clarify, is your role solely you in this position as far as addressing all these environmental aspects, inspections, observations, things like that?
So I provide support to the operations team. So they're the ones that primarily implement the actual inspections. So I support them with developing the program. So when a new regulation comes, then I'll develop the inspection protocols, the sheets, and then train them on it and then roll it out. The way that Lehigh is structured, so we are a international business or company, and our North America corporate offices are in Texas. And so then I'm in the West region, which is their main office is in San Ramon. And so my area then is the Bay Area, nestled in that. And in the West region, it includes Southern California, Arizona, the coast. So within each of those areas, we have another environmental and land managers similar to me perform the same functions, just for different sites in those areas. And then we all report up to one environmental director who oversees then all these sites. So I don't have a good count. I probably should have counted before this call, like how many facilities in the West region, but there's a lot. I think I have the fewest of all my peers.
Wow.
And a few is 14, so that's.
Yeah, and it's kind of typical in our field because with the building materials industry, a lot of times they're kind of spread out as well for the mines. You know, we start our mines away from residences, away from people, and then just over time they creep up, and you know, we usually need space. So they do kind of tend to be far apart, but at the same time, products like hot mix asphalt and concrete need to be close to the raw material sources and then also to the customer base. So then you kind of have this strange tension of wanting to be away from people, but then needing to be close to people at the same time. So then you start seeing these clusters of our industry, kind of the different competitors, you know, kind of grouping together.
That's so interesting. I never like really thought about it that way, and I think that's an interesting like dynamic to have. What an experience.
So, you know, you're talking about your facilities and kind of you touched a little bit about environmental regulations that you deal with. So, yeah, if you could kind of describe again, reiterate what environmental requirements that all these facilities are under and what applies to them. And then maybe if you can touch on like how you kind of meet these requirements in general, and what kind of between all of the various requirements and regulatory requirements, which are kind of the most difficult to tackle, I suppose.
The most difficult one to tackle, that'll change, I guess, month by month. It's whoever's giving me a headache at that day. So, you know, all my facilities have operate under the Bay Area Air Quality Management District for air permits. And so we deal with air quality, and that usually involves production tracking, visual assessments. And then recently, a couple years ago, the Air District came out with a new rule for track out observations and then also visible emissions observations. And those are twice a day for each kind, so that can build up. Then we also have just general motor oils and fuels and maintenance types of materials, and those would fall under hazardous materials, hazardous waste, SPCC, spill prevention, control and countermeasure for petroleum products. And in that grouping, you know, we'll have containment requirements, labeling requirements, and to check on those then inspection requirements. And those inspection frequencies will vary depending on what it is that you're looking at. So hazardous waste in a tank would have a daily inspection, but then just hazardous materials might have a monthly. So depending on the site, the inspection frequency can change from daily to monthly, and then can also encompass all of them. Then there's also weekly sometimes, and then an annual. So so it kind of spans all that. And then we also have several facilities with a stormwater permit. So this is for any discharges of runoff, and that has its own visual assessment program, so monthly inspections, and then also sampling, and then associated with the sampling, more inspections. And then there's also wastewater, so WDR and NIPD's type discharges, and that, again, sampling and inspections. And then, you know, we also have some various biological permits and conditional use permits, land use permits, mining permits, and those don't have a standard across the board inspection or monitoring requirements. Those are really tailored to the site on what is needed, especially some of the land use permits. You know, some of our facilities have been in place since, you know, the 50s or 60s, and so it is actually pretty fascinating sometimes. I'll pick up a piece of paper. It's like holding a piece of history, it's like this permit from 1967, and it's all typewritten, and then the pages are yellow. And they have like 2 requirements, and and nowadays, a permit has like 30, 40, 50 pages easy. And that's kind of the trend that I'm seeing as well. A lot of the regulatory agencies, they're getting more and more persnickety, I guess is a polite word for it. And there's just a more lack of trust, I would think, in industry is how I would characterize it, because they want everything to be specified down to the number of trucks that come into your site and make a loop. And it's not enough for us to say, this is generally what we have. They say, well, now you need to document it, and now you need to prove it. So I kind of see that as just the trend, is just we're getting more and more requirements that are more and more specific and more detailed, which results in more and more paperwork.
Yeah. Yeah, and with so many observations, inspections going, spanning for various requirements, as we know, do you have different personnel addressing various observations / inspections, or is it usually just all the same person? What's the easiest way that you've been able to find?
It depends on the site, but that's a great question. So some of our larger sites do have different people. So they'll have a manager, an assistant manager, and so they'll kind of generally take the more complex inspections, and then we'll push some of the more routine, some of the daily inspections onto the mechanics or some of the people who are on the site regularly. Some of our smaller sites only have 4 or 5 people. So for a site like that, the site manager really does it all. And so then part of my job is the training. So then just making sure that the training that I'm giving to the site matches the person, in terms of their education level, their experience level, their responsibility, and then trying to tailor the program so it can make their life as easy as possible. Because I really try to make it not to be a burden on them. I have a saying, I'm not a police, I'm a bodyguard. I'm here to protect the company. I'm here to help them and clear the way. There are things that we just need to do, full stop, for compliance. There's no wiggle room on that. So what I try to do is make it as easy as possible by making sure that it matches the appropriate level to the person and then to the site. If you have a big site that covers 400 or 500 acres, that inspection program is going to be different from one that's a completely paved site that's 2 acres with just maybe 1 discharge point. And so I think that helps a lot too, having the operations team see that I'm really trying to be on their side, so that then we're not constantly fighting each other on things that need to be done. And sometimes I'll flat out admit to them, what we're asking you to do is kind of dumb. Like, yes, I do want you to sit there and count every, we need to find a way to count every single whatever gadget that goes out the door. Yeah. But you kind of have to explain to them, like, this is what your permit says, this is what the requirement is. And, we'll try to negotiate with the agencies up front before the permit is issued, but there's only so much that we can do. So I think that's another approach I take, is just to be really honest and say, yeah, I know this is a pain, but you kind of have to do it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's very interesting, and a good takeaway from today is the honesty and the ability to work with a very diverse group of people, and their knowledge base is very diverse, and be able to provide them the information they need to complete the inspection so that the company can stay on top of everything. Sorry, there's somebody honking in the background. But kind of going off of that, how do you use Mapistry to help you with this? Because there are a lot of inspections, and you have a lot of people using it. And then with that, to what suites are you using on Mapistry, and what's kind of your focus when it comes to Mapistry?
Yeah, I mean, there are many things I like about Mapistry, but one of the things is consistency. So it does help having our stormwater plans across our whole region now have the same format. So for someone like my boss, the environmental director, she can pull a SWIP from any area and just know, okay, I need to find what the BMPs are really quickly. I can go here. And so for me, just having it all in one place, having it all consistent, it just really helps my OCD tendencies. It makes me feel really much more comfortable that we are doing what we need to do. Having the dashboard, being able to see it all in one place saves a lot of time too. Before, when I used to do, one of the things we need to do for stormwater is an annual report. And part of the annual report is, attesting that all the monthly inspections were done correctly and that all your sampling inspections are done correctly. So in the past, that would only happen if I visited the site, so I would have to drive to the site and then flip through the binders, and then make sure each box was checked as well. Because a lot of times, especially if we're in a rush, we'll forget to sign a form, or we'll invert the dates wrong. There's always something. And so then I would have to manually go and check. So if you have to do that across, 20, 30 sites, that takes a lot of time. And so I think the first time I used Mapistry for the annual reports, at that time I had, I think, five sites. I did all that in less than an hour. Just at my desk, I was able just to go through and see all my inspection forms were done. They were all signed. They were all completed correctly. And it was just such a huge time saver. So then when I did do my annual inspections for the stormwater compliance on the site, I was able to focus more on actually looking at the site in more detail, having the conversation and the dialogue with the site personnel, like the people I may not typically have a lot of time to talk to, like the field, the grounds people, have more of a conversation with them. And then explaining what their role is in the bigger picture of things is really helpful too. This is kind of a little bit of divergent, but what I find is people tend to do things more if they understand why, right? If I just shove a piece of paper at them and say, do this, they're sure, I'll check all the boxes. But if I explain to them, the reason you're doing this is because we don't want this other thing to happen, because then this can go into the creeks. This can impact the fish and start kind of building the connections there. And I find that not having to sit in the office and flip through all the papers allows me then to build that relationship a lot more. And then the people on the ground are more likely to call me if something happens.
Yeah.
If they see something, they're like, hey, Tina, I don't know if this is normal, is it okay? And they could be like, no, let's stop it. Let's respond to it. But there's less fear if they see me as more accessible. So that's one of the, again, I think the time saving it's just a great upshot for Mapistry. And then, I think I said this already, but having everything in one place, because then I don't have to always have everything with me, because I've gone to sites before and then just spontaneously said, well, let's check and see what your SWIP says, or let's see what this other site's doing so that we can, mimic that here at this site. And then just through the website, I can pull information from different locations and then use that as a training resource as well. And that also encourages transparency.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
You bring up some really wonderful points. Thank you for that. Especially, you highlighted that I like to hear was the being able to utilize Mapistry as a tool for your, in this case, stakeholders, or your higher management, which is a really great point in that, yes, all the SWIPs have the same structure, and therefore it's easier to read in the long term, and and can be familiar with where everything is located. And if there's something that looks a little off, you know.
It also helps with cross-training. So in the past, if we have one person trained to do inspections and that person wants to go on vacation, and they have to train somebody else. And then for some of our teams, if they go to different locations, sometimes that can get confusing. So they'll forget, did someone do it already? If someone wants to do it for the person who went on vacation, but the person who went on vacation left the binder in their truck, then how do we access those forms? And so another good benefit of Mapistry, I find, is just that cross-training is a lot easier, and then we can quickly see if something's been done or not been done. So it's not really a question. So that handoff is a lot easier as well.
Yeah.
And then people can go from site to site, and then again, with that consistency, they know, oh, I have to do a hazardous materials inspection. I know where to go, even though it's a new site. I know what questions are going to be asked of me. So they understand sort of the general outline and the general premise, and then they can kind of adjust as needed in the field, but at least it's not starting from ground zero with a brand new site.
Right.
So I use Mapistry to train new site managers as well. Say, okay, all of your requirements for inspection are in this one place, and then we can use that to guide our training and talk about each program. And so it's a good tool as well to supplement training.
Yeah, that's awesome, and that's like a very cool. And I don't think I've heard anybody use it as a training tool that way, which I think, after listening to you talk about it, is a very wonderful idea, and I'm gonna push my customers to do the same thing as well. And I love that it is so easy for your sites or your employees to go to other sites and make sure that they're completing the inspections and not missing anything. I think that's really key, and being able to see on Mapistry, like, if something's overdue or upcoming, especially those daily inspections that so easy to forget to do a daily inspection, but seeing that, having that visualization is also helpful.
Yeah, and I just also wanted to add one point that you made too, that I think we maybe as Mapistry don't actually emphasize enough, is the ability to, like you mentioned, build a community. In that now, things are, your features and your requirements are, you can do them all at your computer, which is super awesome, time saving, of course, but allowing for that opportunity to take a step outside of the inspections and just like zone in, but actually apply what you learned from the inspections to your personnel, and then kind of be able to talk about it. And it maybe even if they have any questions, you can just show them on the, like, look at it's right there, like, let's talk about this, because it's digital, it's there and it's easily available. So I think that kind of highlights both building community as well as transparency too. So yeah, thank you for bringing up that point. That's a really good point. And I'm glad that you're able to use Mapistry in that way.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Well, we have a couple minutes left, and we have one more question that we'd like to ask. This is just in general. Jillian and I were like, what is the one thing we'd like to know? And just, is there any feature or anything that you would, in your like ideal world, it doesn't have to be a Mapistry feature, but is there anything that you would like in a software for environmental compliance or to help your role that you currently don't have in software, like your dream feature?
Well, that's never really thought about that, but I think my dream feature would be telling me what I don't know, because that's the stuff that keeps me up at night, is I don't know what I don't know sometimes, and the rules and the regulations are changing so much that there's been a couple times when just by luck a colleague or a peer just shot me an email and said, hey, have you seen this? And it's like, no, actually, I hadn't seen that. And then I'm able to respond just because someone passed it along. So I think something that can kind of track what the trends are in the regulations, and then figure out what actually the impact would be helpful. I mean, that's not a realistic software, obviously, but that would just kind of be my dream, is a way to have that condensed down. But no, that's an interesting question. I might have to think about that and then circle back to Ryan and say, hey, can you do this actually?
Yeah, I know definitely that is. I mean, I feel like that should be a thing somewhere, because it applies to so many different industries, so many different people that need to keep up to date on these regulations. Like, I struggle with it too. Like, it's hard and it's kind of stressful, and there's so many things changing day to day. So it would make sense if we could somehow get this like update thing. I know like the water board sends some updates and emails, but something that's a little more like in real time. Like they just signed it and now we know.
Yeah, now you just have to do this, break it out from the legalese into very basic language. And I think that's one of the benefits of Mapistry. Just everything is in one place. It's very transparent. It's very easy to use. It's very intuitive. So it just kind of is, for me, gives a little peace of mind on that component. So then I can focus my stress and anxiety on this other component.
Yeah. Well, that's super great to hear. I'm glad. And yeah, it's really been wonderful to talk to you about just everything in general, your background, as well as touching on Mapistry. And it's great to hear how you do your job and your day to day, So thank you so much for chatting with us.
Yes, of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And with that, Jillian, if you go to the next slide, please join us next week. We'll be talking to Asita Cease from Georgia Pacific, and she'll be talking about her career perspective. So that should be a really fun conversation. And then if you have any questions or comments or suggestions, you can always send us an email at info@mapistry.com.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So everyone have a really great Tuesday. And Tina, thank you so much again. It's been a pleasure to have you this morning.
Hi guys. Have a good day.